Hey guys, with full release just over a month away, I felt there was no better time to release a video on some of the ideas and suggestions I'd love to see Dreadhunger implement before full release. I'm sure there are already plenty of changes in the works, so it's understandable if it's too much to get these extra changes in before full release, but I'd just love to know that they've been heard. Okay, I'll be explaining each idea in full, then dive into why I feel it would make a significant positive change to implement these into the game. Not all the ideas on this list were strictly my own. Some I've read in the suggestions channel on the Dreadhunger Discord. I then tried to develop them further for the purpose of this video. Other ideas are from discussions with friends of mine as we talked and theory crafted ways for Dreadhunger to improve in our own personal Discord chats. But of course, all the very best suggestions are definitely my original ideas. I've broken the video into categories to group similar ideas together. The first category are ideas that create more ways to sabotage the expedition for Thrall. Number 1, an extra way to sabotage the boiler, this time from the pipe behind the ship's wheel on the top deck. This pipe can be pre-sabotaged with gunpowder placed in it. Crew can clean out the tube before loading coal, which would take 10 to 20 seconds to do from the top of the ship next to the pipe. The boiler can also be sabotaged from the top chute once the boiler's got going as a normal sort of sabotage. This idea would add a fair way to pre-sabotage, replacing the bug that was recently removed in patch 0.10.3. I loved the pre-sabotage mechanic, but I didn't like how icky it felt to use. It felt like I was abusing a bug in the game, which didn't sit right, despite my love for what it added to the game. For those who aren't sure what I'm talking about, you can put a gunpowder into the boiler when there's a very small amount of coal left, generally about 15 seconds worth of coal left in the ship. If you do so, that gunpowder won't be used to sabotage that batch of coal, but the next batch of coal that is running in the boiler. This can be devastating for the crew, especially if they aren't aware that it's possible to do, and they'll immediately blame players that touched the boiler before it started up. So this replacement idea would be known to all players, whilst creating an extra way to get influential sabotages off. More options for Thrall mean more interesting games with less repetition. Games will be more unique, and players will stay online playing Dreadhunger for longer hours. Of course, there would have to be an easier way to access the top of that tube or simply shrink it down, but I feel there's a lot of potential to have that third sabotage spot, as it won't be so easy to guard all access points to the boiler to prevent sabotages, or at least know who did so from a crew perspective. Number 2, a fourth spell for the Thralls known as Summon Iceberg. The Thrall would need vision on the patch of water they want to summon an iceberg from, and by using their bone knife can summon an iceberg to spawn out of the water in that location. The iceberg would rise from the water and act as an additional iceberg on the map. The cooldown would need to be relatively long to prevent spammy strategies like placing a lot of icebergs at the end of the map, but I feel it could be balanced. For example, 1 tick of charge for the iceberg summon spell would create a smaller iceberg that causes 2 holes in the boat if hit. Level 2 would cause 3 holes, and level 3 would make a regular size iceberg and cause 4 holes if hit. The current Thrall spells do the following. Cannibals slow specific players the Thrall wants to target. Whiteout is a map-wide vision impairment allowing for sneakier Thrall plays, and Spirit Walk allows the Thrall to cover significant ground quickly, making map traversal easier. Summon Iceberg would allow for the slowing of the ship without necessarily being on board. Additional value would be added to who you choose to drive the ship to ensure they really did hit an iceberg that was summoned, and allow the Thrall an extra way to influence the ship's progression without directly outing themselves. Ultimately, it would spread the crew out in where they were positioned on the ship. A player could be positioned at the front of the ship to confirm if an iceberg was summoned, or the crow's nest would increase in value as a player scanned forward to check for new icebergs. And more consideration would go into moving the ship rather than watch the boiler and the captain's quarters, alright, cool, everyone else can do whatever they want. There would not be a map-wide sound effect for this ability, and it would be more of a visual requirement to notice the iceberg being summoned. There's a lot of ways to work out who summoned the iceberg, as the player needs to have a line of sight to summon it, and I feel that there would need to be a limited range as to how far away you can be to summon that iceberg. If odd icebergs appeared up ahead, you know it was a player who pushed ahead to have placed them there. It would also be an option for the ship's driver to summon an iceberg to run into themselves. Again, just more options for thralls to get creative in slowing down the crew's progress. If you need to, you could add a few extra coal sleds around the map to compensate for the extra damage the ship will take throughout the game and the less progress it makes per coal. Number 3, bring back the BIG Gunpowder Bomb, which is a regular barrel with up to 20 gunpowder in it. It makes a lot of noise when lit up, and it would need to be programmed by the developers so that it can only be diffused if all the gunpowder is removed from it, not just one like it was in the previous patches.
It's alright, I can just drive. It's too late, I was already up here. It's only 2 coal anyway. I don't hit it.
Oh, there's a bomb, there's a bomb, there's a bomb, there's a bomb, there's a bomb. Jesus Christ. Holy shit. Okay. It looks like they spirit walk. There's a blood thing here as well.
Yep. Yeah, they did.
Well, I trust you guys then.
Captain, where you at?
Doctor and I'm right here. Yeah, hello.
Want some ammo?
If you got
I haven't got a gun yet, but yeah, I'd love some ammo.
Yeah, I'll give you my gun.
Thank you.
and-
Thank you. See, that is how you build trust in this video game.
I'm taking the barrel.
If it explodes, it would damage the ship equal to the amount of gunpowder still in the barrel. These bombs created high-pressure, intense moments for the crew when they were in their prime. Whenever I'd hear the sound, I'd race to the location and disarm it, risking my life to do so. Your heart pounds as you're trying to get rid of all the gunpowder, and you need to empty 2 item slots to remove the gunpowder out of the barrel and into your inventory space. The gunpowder barrel also added an extra layer to players returning to the ship with regular barrels. Powder kegs are clearly distinguishable, so there's no concern whether a regular barrel has coal or gunpowder in it. I want the high intensity moments back. I want the paranoia of barrels being overloaded with gunpowder, and I want diversity in how thralls can destroy the ship, not just the one type of bomb. It would create a dynamic between powder kegs and gunpowder barrels, and give thralls options in how they want to play, either sneaky and discreet, or loud, chaotic, and destructive. With the increase to how many barrels someone can carry, there will be balancing issues, but I don't see any real issue with a player carrying 4 or 5 gunpowder barrels, given that the ship's maximum leak count is 20. At least no more than a player having 5 or 6 powder kegs as it is currently. I'd also suggest that powder kegs be diffused faster. The challenge should be to locate the powder keg, not to defuse it. A thrall can place the powder keg, and if you try to defuse it, the thrall can chop you up for 7 seconds until you do so. Alternatively, you turn and attack the thrall, but you sacrifice the ship's hull as it will go off and you won't have time to save the ship. The powder keg should also be able to be picked up by the crew or the thrall so that it can be thrown into the water instead of diffused if there's enough time. This will add intensity to the game and less vulnerability for players who are trying to defuse a bomb while the thrall is still on the boat trying to attack them. The second category is minor tweaks that could have a major effect on how Dreadhunger is played. Number 1, poison, tea, and antidotes are made out of 2 herbs instead of 3. With this change, a slight rework of poison would be in order. You'd need to make poison take longer to kill, but it's still lethal. I'm talking over 10 minutes to kill a player outright. Your character would need to have their max health slowly reduced over a long period of time. Throwing up would still occur, but it takes far less health on each of the first 2 vomits, and your speed would be reduced while vomiting. This change would make poison far more of a slow/sabotage to the crew, as players will have time to create their own antidotes after being poisoned, rather than needing to take preemptive measures every single game. As it stands, most experienced players will have at least one antidote for themselves early on, if not more. This is because the alternative is hoping that you aren't poisoned all game. If you are poisoned, there's not enough time to find the resources and save yourself before you die. With these poison changes, antidotes won't be so important to make immediately every game, and poison would be a far more consistent way to slow the crew down. Players would still make antidote, but it wouldn't be such a ridiculously important task to do as soon as possible. It would also work out nicer in the inventory to hold 10 herbs and 5 laudanum, as that equals 5 antidotes, rather than 3 with an odd herb left over. Poison would be in a much better place in the game than it is currently. As it stands, poison is either completely useless, as prepared crews have 5 to 10 antidotes between them already, or no one has made an antidote all game and the whole crew die before they can even go and make a single one. There is no in between. Number 2, remove the ability to double kill a Thrall out of the Brig, full stop. This one will be a little controversial. I know many players who won't appreciate the suggestion making my list, but let's talk fairly and unbiased for a moment. What does double killing a Thrall bring to the game that's a positive? Well, it gives crew a moment of power, a way to kill a known Thrall without them having much of a window to escape. If executed correctly, I believe it's effectively impossible to escape 2 crews shooting you as the door swings open, even when closing the door, fudge. That's about it. Now let's talk about the negatives of double killing. Well, you're effectively removing a player from being able to finish their game of Thrall, the rarer of the 2 roles and potentially their only Thrall game of the night. You're going to upset that player, who you clearly have something in common with as you both love Dreadhunger. The game will be significantly less interesting and challenging now that one of the Thralls is guaranteed double dead. You will likely cause issues in the post-game chat as the double-killed player feels unfairly treated despite it being a mechanic in the game, and you have created a negative and hostile lobby for future games, and depending on who you double-killed, an enemy on the servers. For me, a final decision needs to be made by the developers. Either an official statement saying it's an intentional mechanic that can and should be used by crewmates, and it's a known risk for outing yourself as a Thrall, or make it impossible to do. There's such a moral, irky grey area that conflicts experienced players. On one hand, it's a known mechanic that players can use. On the other hand, treat people how you want to be treated. You're basically an asshole for doing it. I'd like to see it removed. If you'd like to remove it from happening, I'd suggest making it possible for Thralls to spirit walk the moment a skeleton key starts being used on their Brig. Crew could use this to test if a player's the Thrall, and a Thrall can escape double killing and keep the game interesting for both sides. It would also add an extra way for Thralls to help their buddy out by starting a key and not finishing it, so the Thrall can spirit walk sooner than later. An extra mechanic for Thralls to use and crew to keep an eye on, keeping the pace of Dreadhunger quick and the threat of Thralls constant. On to number 3. I'd like to see more ice added to the start of the summit map. So unless the ship is backed up with the coal, there aren't dire consequences for the 8 coal at the beginning of the game being stolen by an overly aggressive Thrall. It will still suck losing 8 coal, but the ship isn't a full heat bar's swim from the ice. It's rare it happens, but if the effect of stealing the coal isn't as effective, then it won't happen as often. Players can still do it, but just won't be rewarded for outing themselves instantly and dying for 8 coal within 30 seconds of the match starting. Number 4. Increase the speed which polar bears can move through the ice when chasing a player. An experienced player has far less trouble dealing with Bongo the bear, with the knowledge he's just a big arrow sponge when he's swimming in the water after you. Bongo should be formidable, and removing the cheesy strategy will both make bears strong again and make bears either a team effort or a challenge for a player who's prepared to fight them. Plus, polar bears are excellent swimmers. It feels wrong that he's that useless when swimming. Number 5. Change human stew so it doesn't tell you that it's a human stew immediately. The icon in the bottom left-hand corner over your food meter will change slowly to cannibal over, let's say, a minute, but it won't tell you until you notice the icon is changed. It will validate the strategy of turning the crew cannibal and trying to starve them early on. You could create more interesting games with a new strategy, as players in the crew will legitimately have to sacrifice one another's first lives to feast. On this strategy, please fix the coding where disconnected players' bodies aren't able to be chopped up for limbs at the moment. Their bodies just stay intact despite hitting them over and over again with a cleaver. Number 6. Eventually, adding more variant totems would diversify what the thralls can do. Planning ahead by building a Spirit Walk totem could be interesting and could boost how quickly your Spirit Walk charges. I'm not sure exactly how it would work yet, but maybe a totem which perhaps emits a different sound that draws wildlife to it. This would act as a way to herd food away from the crew perhaps. There's a lot you can do with this idea, just needs to be brainstormed and developed further. And number 7, whiteouts will muffle the voice chat for players, so crew need to be relatively close by to hear each other clearly. Similar to how it would work if an intense storm came through. It'll make thralling more exciting as crew can't communicate as clearly who's where. With this buff, I'd want to see the whiteout cooldown start once the whiteout ends, not when the whiteout is first used. The third and final category is PvP tweaks to make the fights more interesting and challenging between players. Number 1, I'd like to see a nerf to the damage of the axe. Currently, the axe does more damage than the saber, which feels wrong. The attack speed of the saber is higher, so it does more damage per second overall, but in the current patched climate, any and all players should be making an axe immediately from the beginning of the game. It's 1 wood and 1 iron scrap, ridiculously easy to make, and you make up that 1 wood consistently throughout the game with the extra 1 wood bonus from breaking wooden crates and sleds with an axe. While we're at it, the upgraded saber really shouldn't have durability, or at the very least, twice as much as the original saber. Durability on the saber has always confused me. It's supposed to be the best melee weapon in the game, but it objectively isn't. Even the upgraded version is garbage after 12 swings. It made sense back when you could fix or hone the sword out in the field using stones. Perhaps they can bring that mechanic back and add in durability to all weapons, including the bow, which would require a sinew to fix it after a set amount of shots. This will make the game more challenging overall, and I'm not saying it's a great idea, but if we're going to have durability on the saber, I want it to make sense, and I want it to be worthwhile keeping or simply removed. Number 2, reduce pistol damage, decrease reload time, and make it so that players can sprint whilst reloading. Pistols would do perhaps 40 damage, so they 3-shot a player at full health. They would be more effective against PvE with the increased reload speed, but ammo isn't reusable, making bow still preferable against cannibals and wolves. It would make fighting with the pistol more dynamic and make fights last longer. The longer the fights last, the more potential for interesting plays. If the pistol is nerfed, it will buff the armory as well, making it more desirable to open and the primary method of finding and killing thralls. Pistols feel clunky and take so long to reload. The Marine's buff is ridiculous for PvP because of this reason. Decreasing the reload time overall will be a slight nerf to the Marine as well, which is a happy coincidence for me. Number 3, to craft a pistol, you need to find 2 or 3 gun parts, but gun parts are also more common, found in ammo crates once again. However, all ammo crates are now buried in snow around the map, giving incentive to build a shovel and slow down bullet production early on, at least without giving away what you're doing. This, alongside the rework to pistol damage and reload speeds, should make the pistol far more interesting to create and use. It's horrible spending all game looking for gun parts and never finding them in locked chests. A dedicated player should be able to reliably source and create a gun, but they should be a known threat to the crew as they're seen prioritizing looking for a gun over, say, collecting coal for the team. It will also make gunpowder more difficult to source and likely increase the importance of turning coal to gunpowder for the Thrall. If the alternate method of making gunpowder barrels is introduced too, these three changes should all work well hand in hand. Obviously, each of these ideas do need further development, and I'd be very happy to jump into a Discord chat and talk this through with anyone who's interested. Just send me a DM over Discord. There were a lot of really good suggestions I read in the Discord, and I couldn't put them all in, so I settled on the few that I did include here. Obviously, not every idea in here is perfect and a surefire winner, but if you don't like an idea, I'd appreciate if you could explain why in the comments, not just a generic blah, 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 as people tend to do when they argue. And then we can continue the discussion and develop ideas in the comments of this video as well. This also goes for the suggestions you liked, and any of your own suggestions you'd like my thoughts on. Just post them in the comments and we'll keep talking down below. If you enjoyed this video, let me know and I'll make a part 2 with more suggestions and exploring why they'd be good additions to the game. There is so much potential in Dread Hunger, and the more ideas and the more suggestions we throw out there and we develop together, the better chance we have of this game growing to the successful game that it so deserves to be. Thanks for watching. Like if you enjoyed the video and subscribe for more. I stream Dread Hunger live on Twitch quite regularly. The link's in the description if you'd like to come by sometime. There's a bunch more Dread Hunger gameplay videos right over here, and more detailed guides and analysis videos up on my channel if you're interested. Good luck out in the Arctic, and watch out for Bongo.